Paul Krugman earlier stated this summertime about the death of high inflation. Let's take a look at what he said. As a number of people have been reminding us lately, the talk of high inflation, nay, hyperinflation, has been widespread ever since the Fed began to fight the Great Recession, and the failure of the predicted high inflation to appear has done nothing to shake their conviction that they have the truth, and that those of us have been right are nonetheless wrong. So one thing I wonder about is the extent to which attitudes reinforced not by the usual crank tendencies, right-wing leanings, and so on, but also by the fact that economists love to talk about runaway inflation because it's something that's so easy to explain. You run the printing press to cover your deficits, and off you go. Yet this is getting awfully stale. Not only has the promised high inflation failed to appear here in America, but high inflation has largely vanished elsewhere. First of all, a lot of these guys like Krugman, whether you agree with them or not, they are correct in the short term. We have not seen the nasty inflation get out of control yet. We haven't seen the 20, 30, 40% that Schiff has been talking about. I am a supporter of Schiff and Ron Paul. But at the same time, Krugman believes the government numbers where it's 1%, which obviously is a joke. If you look at MIT's number, it says 2%. But if you look at how they measure inflation, they're just looking at prices, right? They're not looking at the quantity size of goods. And you could just do your research that a lot of these goods are getting smaller. Article after article. Google it yourself. Put that aside though. So a lot of these guys still believe that if you, number one, increase the money supply and credit via the Federal Reserve, you're not going to get runaway inflation. In the short term, they could be right. Long term, they're most likely going to be wrong. Okay, there are a lot of guys on the left, not like Krugman, but many have the feeling that if you just simply print money out of thin air, or if you have the Federal Reserve engage in quantitative easing, that's going to be virtually no inflation because you have rates low, banks aren't lending, they're just playing in the derivatives market. And this is the mindset of how these guys work. And I actually had a conversation before I start reading this with a younger girl. She was, I think, 23, 4 years younger than me. And what she basically said was that inflation is really hard to determine how it's going to come out. And in addition to that, what the Federal Reserve is doing is fantastic. We have no inflation. Janet Yellen should continue to print money like crazy. And a lot of these guys, number one, fall into the category of what I'm going to read right now and how they think. It started in 1958 when economist A.W. Phillips published an article claiming to see a link between unemployment and inflation in Great Britain. When unemployment fell, inflation tended to rise, and vice versa. Soon, other economists started to find that same relationship in economies of other nations. The link came to be known as the Phillips curve. For many, all those studies seemed to confirm that there was a link between growth and inflation. Soon, economists started to say that the job of a central bank was to maintain the lowest level of unemployment that doesn't spark inflation, the so-called non-acceleration inflation rate of employment, or NIRU. But some economists weren't convinced. At the University of Chicago, Milton Friedman argued the Phillips curve was just an illusion. He argued that price inflation fooled businesses into thinking that demand for the product was going up, so they hired more people. That's why there seemed to be a link, said Richard Vedder, an economist at Ohio University. Friedman's theory explained a fact about the inflation-unemployment relation. Inflation tends to precede drops in unemployment, not follow. But Friedman said that the Phillips curve could not be sustained. At some point, business leaders would wise up, figure out that the reason the prices they can charge are getting higher is because of inflation, not an increase in real demand. When that happened, the link between inflation and unemployment would break, Vedder said. Friedman was largely dismissed in the economics profession until the 1970s. That's when stagflation, the presence of both high inflation and high unemployment, confirmed his ideas. Friedman won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1976 for his work. There's no question now that inflation is a monetary phenomenon. It happens when the central banks let the money supply grow too fast and there are too many dollars chasing too few goods, Angel said. So based on that previous article that was featured in the Mises Institute, or they just copied a portion of it, or most of that article, what was the thesis? That the 1970 central planner economists were clearly wrong, and that just because you have high unemployment, you know what? You can still have high inflation. Those guys were totally wrong, these central planning economists. And guys like Friedman, there were Hayek, Mises, all these libertarian economists were spot on that inflation is simply a monetary phenomenon. And right now, what we have is an increase in money supply and credit. Now, you see this picture of Peter Schiff. Peter Schiff has been calling for a dollar collapse, dollar demise, nasty inflation, at least 30%, 40%, so on and so on. And the thing is, what we have right now are artificially low rates, banks aren't lending, we have all these guys in the derivatives markets just using this quantitative easing, playing around in these markets, and two, they're alleviating what's going on the balance sheets of these banks. And we have $2.3 trillion in excess reserves. The Federal Reserve is paying these banks to keep these reserves on hand. And then, what will happen when interest rates go up? Initially, you could see a deflationary head fake, which I've been talking about. You could see the market go down. You could probably see the Dow go to 20,000. I'm not making guarantees, but this is what's going on in my mind. Maybe Dow 20,000s, metals may rally a little bit, but not so much, and then they could crash. You could see the Dow crash, and you could see that deflationary head fake. You could see bail-ins like we saw in Cyprus. But then what happens after there? The Federal Reserve is most likely going to print money like crazy again. And this time around, whether it's going to be in a few years, a decade or two, I don't know. But eventually, they're going to cut taxes. When they cut taxes, the velocity money is going to pick up. Velocity money picks up, guess what? You're going to see that inflation. Inflation is always an increase in money supply and credit. And since they have too many dollars floating out there, they're going to chase this goods. And that's when you're probably going to see the nasty inflation. This is what the guys on the left don't understand. America has a dynamic economy compared to Japan. They're saying that, hey, this is Japan. This is not Japan. Japan has a demographic problem. Japan, if you look at it carefully, they have a xenophobic immigration policy. Whether you agree with it or not, I'm not getting into that. They don't want any foreigners coming in. The United States allows people of all backgrounds to come in. And there could be problems with that, sure. But at the same time, you're getting individuals like Sergey Brin to come over and start a company like Google, which has revolutionized our industry or the worldwide economy since 2000, 2001. I'm not going to get into the debate of immigration, but that's the thing that separates America from countries like Japan. So if you have a dynamic economy, you have all these excess reserves floating out there, you have individuals or you have a party that wants to cut taxes without cutting spending, then what's going to happen to these extra dollars? What's going to happen when the banks start lending? It may not happen tomorrow. It may not happen in a few years. A decade or two from now? Yeah, that's the problem that I see happening. And then secondly, if you want to look at what happened in 1945, they started to have all this inflation, and in the 1950s they lowered interest rates to 1%, and you didn't see that inflation materialize, nasty inflation, until the end of the Bretton Woods gold standard, fractional reserve system, in 1971. That's when you started to see the inflation. That's when Arthur Burns also started to print money like crazy. And that's when these central planning economists were dead wrong. Look at the velocity of money. Velocity of money basically shows how fast money is changing hands within a given year. And if you look when the economy starts to grow, you see a higher velocity. In 1999, you saw a velocity of 2.2. This is M2 velocity. And then if you want to look at velocity in 2007, is around 2%. Where's velocity right now? It's pretty much dead. It's at 1.65. Excuse me, it's at 1.569. I like a better graph of money velocity. It's velocity of MZM velocity. And this is, long story short, just velocity of money that's liquid, not including time deposits, which obviously are not liquid. If you want to look at the money velocity or MZM velocity in 1981-ish, 3.5. So money changed hands approximately 3.5 times in a given year. And that's why Volcker had to jack up rates in order to prevent the collapse of the dollar, because that would have happened if Volcker did not take aggressive action. If you look at it right now, MZM velocity is 1.411. Money is not changing rapidly, or money is not changing hands rapidly as it was in 1979 when rates were higher. If rates go up, and it's in my opinion that rates are going to go higher, and how you're going to get that is you're going to get the government to cut taxes. When they cut taxes, we know Republicans cut taxes, and the fact is you have $2.3 trillion as an excess reserves. When that happens, banks are going to start to lend. Why are they going to start to lend? Because people are going to have more money. Right now, a lot of people are broke. Some person left a comment in my video. He said that you're virtually going to have no inflation because people are broke, and that's why banks don't want to lend. What happens when the economy starts to get going again? We start to create a lot more jobs than we are right now. Even though they may be on the low end, we create a lot of service sector jobs, but we also will create more higher paying jobs. What's going to happen then? Velocity of money is going to pick up. You're going to see higher inflation come down the road. Whether the government reports that or not, it doesn't matter. People are going to feel the pain. Like 2006, 2007. So people are saying that, hey, central banks are doing a fantastic thing. We're going to see virtually no inflation. You hard money guys are wrong. We could be wrong in the short term, but long term, hard money guys are usually right when it comes to inflation and all that. Milton Friedman was dismissed until the 1970s. Do I agree with everything that he said? No. But if you look at it, the Austrian school over the long term, libertarian-minded folks get the long-term trend. Keynesians get, or liberals get, the short-term trend. And that's my opinion on this. I'm not guaranteeing what asset's going to go in value. I'm just looking at the trends of the past and just analyzing that we're going to get a lot higher inflation down the road. Does it have to materialize right now? No. And this is what I tell a lot of these guys that I interview, that this thing could actually take a longer time to unfold. Or this chaos that they're talking about, the nasty inflation, could take a longer time fold to, number one, happen. And we shall see who's right. Anyways, thanks for listening to me, guys. I'm going to be really busy this week. I may just upload some interviews of some guests that I like, or some of these other channels that post interviews that give me permission. I may just do that. I'm just going to be really busy this week. So I'm probably not going to be doing a lot of videos like this. Anyways, talk to you another time, guys.